Oh no, this plane is swaying so much. I wonder if it's going to be alright if we crash here.
Seeing Megan looking anxious and close to tears, I made up my mind. In the emergency, I unbuckled my seatbelt and started walking down the violently swaying aisle. Ignoring Megan trying to stop me,
I'll take over the flying.
I said that. I headed toward the cockpit. My name is Mike. You could say I grew up watching airplanes fly over my house, which was near an airport. To me, airplanes were that familiar. Both my dad and mom would take me to the airport on weekends. Looking at airplanes and eating at the airport was the usual routine for our family. I remember, it was around when I was 5 years old. I got lost inside the airport. A new airplane was being unveiled, and excited, I broke free from my parents' hands and ran. With the airport crowded for the new airplane unveiling, I was pushed and swept along until I completely lost track of where I was. Somehow, I managed to get out of the crowd, and I was already crying, I think. Dad, Mom, hey, where are you? Dad, Mom. Being shy since I was little, and always clinging to my parents, I was terrified of being alone. I was crying loudly and I kept calling for my parents. People around me could tell from my situation that I was lost. Still, no one ever tried to help me. Then, one man approached me. He knelt down to match my eye level.
What's wrong? Are you okay? Where are your dad and mom?
I remember his eyes and voice being very kind. Finally, someone spoke to me, and I felt relieved, which made me cry even more. Dad and Mom, they're gone. Crying, I managed to convey that I was lost, and continued wiping my tears. As I managed to told that, the man smiled kindly at me.
I see, you hung in there, you did good. You're all right now because I will find your mom and dad together.
The man got out a pack of pocket tissues, took one out, wiped my tears, and gave me the rest. It had airplanes printed on it, and as much as I love airplanes, it was enough to make me feel calm and smile. Seeing that, the man laughed joyfully and talked to me.
Do you like airplanes? Yes, I love airplanes. When I grow up, I'm going to be a pilot. I can see airplanes from my house.
I talked to the man about what kinds of airplanes I usually saw. That's wonderful. Well, let's talk while we walk. You must be tired from crying, let me carry you. The man carried me in his arms and walked slowly through the airport, looking for staff as we talked. As a budding airplane enthusiast, I was so happy that someone was listening to me. I kept talking about all sorts of things about airplanes. How long had we walked? I suddenly heard my parents calling out to me from a distance. Aha, that's Mom and Dad's voices. At my words, the man turned around. And there they were, my parents. My mom was already in tears. Dad, Mom. As the man lowered me to the ground, I jumped from his arms and ran towards my parents. My parents hugged me, relieved, and tears that had subsided started to flow a little again. Even as a child, I felt that I had to tell my parents about the man, showing them the packet of pocket tissues he had given me as I talked about him. Thank you very much. We really appreciate all your help. Thank you so much. My parents expressed their gratitude, and the man smiled kindly.
Not at all, it's nothing really. Besides, I enjoyed our conversation about airplanes.
Saying that, the man approached me and patted my head as he spoke.
I'm glad you like airplanes. I hope you would be a pilot someday. With your love for planes, you're definitely going to make it as a pilot. Don't forget your dream. Yeah, I'm definitely going to become a pilot. Oh, your pocket tissues.
After my words, my parents told the man they wanted to give him something in return, but he shook his head and said he would give it to me.
As a memento of meeting a young airplane expert, please keep it as a gift.
With a smile, the man insisted, and we all thanked him. After parting ways with the man, my parents sternly reminded me not to let go of their hands again, and we went to see the new model of the airplane. It looked so cool, and watching it, I firmly decided that I would definitely become a pilot one day. From then on, I learned what was necessary to become a pilot. Staying healthy, getting plenty of sleep, and having good eyesight were important. While adhering to these principles, once I started middle school, I read books on aerodynamics and studied instrumentation within my capabilities. Knowing that becoming a pilot required more academic effort than I had thought, I studied hard and consistently kept my grades among the top in middle school.
Dad, Mom, I want to go to a high school with a pilot training program. It's away from home and I'd be living in a dorm, but could you let me go?
It had been my dream since childhood, and I was prepared to persuade them even if they opposed it. But instead of opposing, my parents supported me.
It's finally the first step towards your dream. You've always said you'd become a pilot since you were little. We've prepared the funds already. You really are steadfast. Go for it. Now that you've come this far, give it your all.
Encouraged by my parents, I was really happy. I thanked them and doubled down on my studies, successfully getting accepted. Living in the dorm means I can still communicate with my parents, but I won't be able to see them except for long breaks. It would be a lie to say I'm not lonely, but I am thrilled to have taken the first step toward achieving my dream.
So I'm off. I'll be back for breaks.
And so, I stepped forward towards my dream. My high school life was full of excitement and fun. Fortunately, I was blessed with great classmates and teachers. Of course, the lessons were tough, and there were times when I felt like giving up. When I went home during breaks, I sometimes vented to my parents about my struggles. But I continued to study hard, and by the time I graduated, I had earned my private pilot license. The thrill of holding the controls and flying through the skies is unforgettable. Then I entered an aviation college, and after more days immersed in studies, obtained my commercial pilot license and got a job with a major airline. And then, hey, Mike, do your job. Don't just sit there daydreaming. The voice of my supervisor, George, snapped me back to reality. Shoot, I had zoned out while entering data. I'm sorry. My apologies. I began entering the data I had been asked to handle.
Come on, give me a break. You're 35, aren't you? If it wasn't for your dad's referral, we wouldn't have hired you. Do it well for your dad's sake, too. I'm sorry, George. I'll be more careful from now on.
I looked George in the eye and said I was sorry so he wouldn't scold me anymore. George seemed about to say something more when Megan interrupted.
Come on, George. Mike's only been here for 4 months, right? He's just getting used to things and might be feeling a bit worn out. Let's leave it at that for now. Oh, may I report the results of the other day's negotiation?
Megan smoothly stepped between me and George, steering the conversation away. Everything happened so naturally that George just said to me, "That's it," and I was able to return to my seat without him saying anything more. After that, I focused and finished inputting the data.
See you tomorrow.
At the end of the workday, I greeted everyone and left the floor. I saw Megan walking ahead of me.
Megan, see you tomorrow. See you. Are you just finishing up?
Megan spoke to me with a smile. For your information, Megan is the same age as me and a single mother. She's currently raising her 6-year-old son alone, and despite the challenges, she's always smiling.
Yes, that's right. Thanks for earlier. I was zoning out a bit.
Megan laughed brightly at my apology.
It happens. You must be getting tired. Make sure not to overdo it. Thank you.
She's cheerful and outgoing. Megan is an indispensable part of the company. Megan is fluent in foreign languages and primarily handles dealings with overseas clients who require such skills.
Make sure you don't wear yourself out either, Megan. You have your son to take care of. Thank you. I need to make sure this negotiation succeeds for my son's sake. Just a little more to go, so I'll keep at it.
After chatting a bit more, we parted ways for the day. 6 days later, Megan collapsed at the office with a fever. She was lying down on the sofa, looking exhausted.
Hey, are you alright, Megan? If you're down, this deal could be in trouble. Wasn't there supposed to be a call from the client today?
George's words made the faces of Megan's team pale. In fact, French was needed for this negotiation, but only Megan and the assistant chief, Sophia, could speak and understand French in the team. Unfortunately, Sophia was out, having caught the flu from her child, and was resting at home. As everyone was turning pale, the phone rang at the worst possible moment.
I'll handle it. I'll take the call.
As Megan tried to get up, George stopped her, but there was nothing else to be done. If she speaks French when she is dizzy with a fever, it would be difficult if there is any miscommunication. I remembered how hard Megan has always worked and how passionately she spoke about succeeding in this negotiation for her sensei. Ignoring George's restraint, Megan stood up, and at that moment, I snatched the receiver from the troubled male employee's hand and said in French,
I really apologize for the delay. Unfortunately, due to the person in charge is not feeling well, another staff will take over.
Everyone was stunned by the French coming from my mouth. While talking to the person, I quickly scribbled a note to a nearby staff member, telling them to take her to the hospital immediately. The staff member saw my note, ran to George, and they hurriedly took Megan to the hospital. Finally feeling a bit relieved, I concentrated on the conversation in French after a long time. After finishing the call, I translated it into English for the staff. The client understands the illness of our representative and said a response in 2 days will be fine. I was repeatedly thanked by the staff, but I felt strangely out of place. I've never spoken French since I joined this company. Perhaps it's because I was perceived as someone who just quietly did data entry, so it must have been quite a surprise. Feeling all eyes on me made me somewhat uncomfortable.
I'm glad I could help. Then I'll get back to my work.
Returning to my desk, I started on the daily data entry tasks.
Hey Mike, can you come here for a sec?
After taking Megan to the hospital, George returned. I was called into another room and George explained the situation to me.
Sorry about earlier. I really appreciate your help, thank you. No worries, I didn't do much. About Megan, she's suffering from exhaustion. The doctor preached to me in a very angry way. She needs to be hospitalized for observation for at least 3 days. Meanwhile, Megan asked if you, Mike, could handle our client until she's back. Sophia still can't come to work. What do you think?
I was taken aback by this unexpected request. At the time, my only thought was to get Megan to the hospital quickly. I hadn't expected this at all. I could have declined, but realistically, if no one handled it, this business deal would fall through. Knowing how much Megan had invested in this negotiation, I had no choice but to agree.
Okay, I'll do my best.
After that, I was tasked with handling communications with a client until Megan returned. Of course, there was a lot I didn't know, so I asked the remaining staff members for detailed information on the negotiations. Somehow, I managed, and on the 5th day, Megan returned to work.
Everyone, I'm really sorry for any trouble I've caused. My apologies.
Upon arriving at work, Megan sincerely apologized. These were people who knew how hard Megan usually works. No one complained. On the contrary, they were apologizing to Megan instead. After a round of talks, Megan was also sincerely sorry to me. I'm truly sorry for the inconvenience I caused.
I don't mind at all. I've summarized our interactions with the client so far. Do you have a moment to go over them? Of course, that would be great.
I then detailed to Megan the discussions I had with the client during her absence.
I see, thank you. You really helped a lot by taking care of all these details. No, in my case, it was more about confirming details and rescheduling rather than technical discussions. My French was good enough for that. I don't remember much from that time, but I think it was very beautifully pronounced French. Have you lived in France by any chance?
Well, I was somewhat reluctant to delve into that topic, and looked away as I responded. Megan seemed to sense my mood. She didn't ask me any further. I felt thankful for Megan's mature handling of the situation, and simultaneously a bit ashamed of myself.
Thank you. With all you've done, we'll be fine now. Sophia will be back at work soon too.
Thus, I finished my temporary help, and went back to my original job, data entry. I thought I'd be out of the business negotiations from then on, and indeed, I wasn't involved any further. Yet here I am, somehow, at the airport again. Next to me was Megan, and her son Jake, and her mom who had come to see her off.
Mom, good luck with your work. I'll behave and stay with Grandma. Thank you, Jake. I'll do my best. Make sure to listen to your grandma and be a good boy.
Watching this happy scene between mother and son, I felt a pang of sadness. I find myself at the airport again, filled with that same feeling. I had thought Megan and Sophia would handle the business trip, but just 2 days before leaving for France, Sophia injured her leg and couldn't travel. When that happened, Megan asked me to join her, and before I knew it, I was swept up in the rush of preparing for the trip.
Hey, you take care too. You might not want it now that you're old, but here, I'll give this to you.
Jake, smiling, greeted me and handed me something. As I knelt down to receive it, I realized it was like a tiny handmade airplane. The words "have a nice trip," which he would have worked hard to write himself on the surface. Feeling happy, I gently placed my hand on Jake's head.
Thank you. I'll keep it safe. With this, I'll be just fine.
Feeling bashful, Jake hugged Megan and hid his face.
Jake, don't be rude. He's young, not old. Oh, sorry, you are young.
I almost said that 35 years old was not young, but then I would have said that Megan, who was the same age as me, was not young either. I wanted to praise myself who considered that before saying it. Is it better not to talk about age with women? Feeling a bit awkward, I just played along with Jake.
Thanks, I will do my best too.
Considering the boarding time, it was time to go through security, so Megan and I headed to the security check area. Waving to Jake and his grandmother as we left, we got in line. At the baggage check, someone called out, "Mike." Turning to the voice, I recognized the staff member I had gotten along well with until I left my last job.
Mike, is that you? How have you been? It's been a while. I'm getting by, thanks.
Being at this airport meant there was a chance of running into old colleagues. Unfortunately, knowing that the plane we were boarding was operated by my former employer's airline cast a shadow over my mood. Some other staff members also noticed me and seemed surprised. Great to see you. Where are you going? I'm off to France. I kept my responses brief. The security officer seemed to sense my mood and probably understood there was more to it. I see. Well, it's good to see you're doing well. Have a good trip. He gave a slightly sad smile and moved on to deal with the next passenger. While we were talking, Megan didn't say a word, but I could feel an indescribable atmosphere from her. It was as if she had something she wanted to ask but held herself back. For the moment, I bought a bottle of water at a store just past security checkpoint, and we waited for the boarding announcement at the gate.
Do you wonder who I really am?
I asked Megan bluntly. She nodded in response to my question.
People have their reasons, you know? There are things they don't want to talk about. We're old enough to have more than one of those, aren't we?
Megan laughed heartily. Her brightness and kindness truly felt like a relief.
So, you know, whatever kind of past you've had, or even if you were the worst kind of person to me, you're someone who can't just ignore others in trouble. You're the kind-hearted guy who gets flustered when a kid thinks you are young.
Something tickled the back of my nose, and I quickly sniffed to regain composure.
Thank you.
I couldn't look at Megan, so I looked away. Just then, the boarding announcement came at right time. Megan and I picked up our bags and boarded the plane. I checked our seat numbers and stowed Megan's luggage in the overhead compartment.
Thanks. I just need this with me, and I'll be fine.
She held onto the handmade airplane Jake had given her.
Right? I'll do the same.
We laughed together as we sat down, just as a flight attendant was passing by. She was checking to make sure the overhead compartments were properly closed. At that moment, our eyes met. I couldn't help but laugh at the surprised expression on her face.
Mike, what are you doing here?
Her name is Samantha. She is a mid-level flight attendant, known for taking good care of her juniors and being competent at her job.
Long time no see. How have you been? I've been good, thanks. I'm surprised to see you, but glad you're doing well.
Perhaps it was my imagination, but it seemed like her eyes got wet with tears. I really owed her a lot in the past, which made me feel guilty about how things had ended between us. That thought prompted me to apologize.
I'm sorry, Samantha. You're always so supportive, and
She received my apology with her usual kind smile.
No worries, Mike. I'm just happy to see you on a plane again.
Their work is scheduled by the minute. We couldn't chat forever in front of other passengers. Seeing my nod, she returned to her duties. I resettled in my seat and buckled up.
This might sound strange to say now, but I actually have a fear of heights. I'm feeling pretty nervous.
Megan's sudden confession surprised me. She was smiling, but her face was pale.
Are you okay? Sometimes it's best just to sleep if you're feeling like this. That's true. Jake knew about my fear of heights. That's why he gave me the charm.
I see. I didn't know that.
If talking makes it easier, let's do that. Thank you, could we?
Of course, I replied, and we chatted quietly until the plane took off. All checks were completed, and the plane began its takeoff preparations. As the plane accelerated, the force pressed against us. I was used to it, but when I saw her, she was not okay. I thought she might mind, but when I extended my left hand, Megan quietly said, "Thank you," and took it. After the plane leveled off, Megan gently let go of my hand.
Thank you. That was very helpful. It's kind of embarrassing though.
Her face flushed a little from embarrassment, which was somewhat relieving.
It's okay. Many people get sick or nervous. The staff are used to dealing with passengers like that. Right? There are probably others like me afraid of heights here too. Definitely. They must be sitting tight and trying to look like nothing.
When I said it jokingly, it seemed to ease Megan's tension. During the crew introduction, I recognized that the pilot on that day was Jason, who had supported me before. And Austin was the co-pilot. He used to be my junior. We then enjoyed the in-flight movie and meal service. As sleepiness began to creep in, and I closed my eyes to rest, the seatbelt sign suddenly turned on.
What happened?
What's going on? I held Megan's hand as she reflexively grabbed onto my arm and encouraged her. There must not have been that much turbulence in this sky area. From what I could see out the window, there was no indication of storm clouds. What's going on? Just as I pondered this, the sign turned off again. As I comforted Megan, all I could do was watch and wait. Then, an announcement came over the intercom. But I tensed up a bit when I sensed something unusual in the announcement. It was a doctor call announced by Samantha. Doctor calls aren't rare on flights. Indeed, a man had raised his hand and was speaking with a flight attendant.
I wonder if it's a medical emergency. I hope they're okay.
It seemed that Megan understood the meaning, and she looked worried. I was worried too, but there was nothing I could do. At that time, Samantha was walking towards us. She was a professional, so she responded with a smile even when someone talked to her, but I felt something was going wrong. She smiled at passengers, but her face tensed up once the interaction was over.
Excuse me, Mike.
She called out to me and whispered a word into my ear. I was surprised by her word and stared at her face.
Are you sure?
Yes, please, you're the only one who can take it, Mike. As if covered by Samantha's desperate voice, the plane swayed violently, perhaps due to the air currents. Passengers screamed, and Megan held onto me tightly. She held the charm Jake gave her.
Jake.
Seeing Megan's teary eyes, I decided I had no time to waste in hesitation. I must get this nice and sweet woman to her destination properly, and send her back to Jake's place.
Alright, let's go.
Thank you. A relieved Samantha and I started heading towards the cockpit, but Megan held me back.
Where are you going? It's dangerous.
I briefly explained to Megan, who was desperately trying to stop me.
Right now, the pilot is incapacitated. If it stays like this plane will crash. What? You're kidding.
It might not have been the best thing to tell someone who is afraid of heights, but I had to tell Megan the truth or she wouldn't let go of my arm. She was holding on that tightly. What Samantha told me earlier was, more precisely, incapacitation. It meant one of the pilots was unable to fly. Normally, it's possible to fly with just one person. But if the other person was also in danger, realistically, there was no one left who could fly this plane.
It's okay, Megan. I'll fly the plane because I am a pilot.
As Megan was still shocked, I managed to free myself and rush to the cockpit with Samantha. When we opened the cockpit, Jason was lying on the floor receiving treatment from Dr. Miller.
Jason, how are you feeling? It could be the heart. If it didn't show up on a routine checkup, I don't think it's that serious, but it doesn't change the fact that he needs to get to the hospital in a hurry.
I nodded at Dr. Miller's words. While listening to Dr. Miller, I took my seat in the cockpit. Austin was also showing symptoms of hyperventilation, seemingly half unconscious.
Probably that young pilot can't fly either. Are you sure you're okay? Yes, because I definitely have someone I want to take to safety. It's a bit busier flying alone, though.
I paid close attention to the altitude meter and other instrument readings, gripping the control yoke. Fortunately, we were already preparing to land at Charles de Gaulle Airport. I was concerned about Austin's condition, but I communicated with the ground crew. I informed them that Jason had collapsed and arranged for an ambulance and priority landing. After briefly finishing the communication, I felt the weight of the control yoke I hadn't felt in a long time.
Samantha, please make an announcement to the passengers. Help Dr. Miller and take your seat. Okay.
I gave instructions around me and noticed that the fear of flying the plane was fading. Months ago, I was in the same situation as Austin now. Bill, the captain who was piloting the plane with me, collapsed. Bill was not only my hero as a great captain, but also the one who saved me. He was the man who had held me when I got lost at the airport.
Oh, you dropped something? Oh no, thank you so much.
About a month after I started working, I dropped my pocket tissue, and Bill picked it up for me.
Well, this is.
Bill examined my pocket tissue intently.
Is something wrong? Where did you get this?
I didn't understand the meaning of his question, and answered honestly.
No, I got lost at the airport when I was little. A man who was with me at the time gave it to me.
Hearing that, Bill smiled very happily.
Hey, no way, you're the airplane enthusiast.
Hearing that nostalgic term from Bill made my eyes widen.
Wait, Bill, that was you?
After hurriedly comparing our memories, it was undoubtedly Bill who had been with me when I was lost. I was so happy, I finally got to properly thank him. Thank you so much for that time. I was scared, but I was glad you were there.
Well, I enjoyed talking with the airplane enthusiast. So you really fulfilled your dream and became a pilot. Well done.
Originally, Bill was a caring person, but since then, he has become even more affectionate towards me. We went out together privately and deepened our relationship by dining out with my parents as well. I truly respected Bill, both as a pilot and as a person. I was looking forward to the day I would co-pilot with Bill. The weather was fine, and there were no problems with the aircraft. The passengers were on time, and the flight took off smoothly. Then, just a short while before reaching our destination, Bill started moaning and holding his head. "Bill, what's wrong?" My head, suddenly. "Sorry, I'm fine." Even as he said that, Bill was pale and sweating profusely. Seeing Bill's unusual state, I called the cabin attendants via radio. While doing so, Bill began to sway from side to side. I unbuckled my seatbelt and pushed Bill's body back. If you manipulate the control stick too harshly, the autopilot will disengage.
Bill, please hang in there."
At that moment, a cabin attendant rushed in and saw Bill's condition, then called for a doctor. My heart was pounding, and I was panicking. Although I had experience, this was the first time I faced such a situation. Most of all, I felt the pressure of Bill's crisis and the passengers' lives all depending on me, and I started hyperventilating. Even with my difficult breathing, I remember thinking that I had to handle it somehow. Looking back, I'm surprised I managed to land safely. The next thing I clearly remember is being in the medical room after landing. Fortunately, I was informed that Bill had survived. But the thought of something like this happening again suddenly terrified me. Despite having wanted to be a pilot so badly and achieving my dream. Although Bill, who was still in the hospital, contacted me wanting to meet, I became afraid to see him and ended up quitting my job and shutting myself away at home. "Mike, one of my friends is looking for somebody to work at his place. You've always wanted to be a pilot and pushed hard for it. How about taking a break and looking for a different path?" I didn't want to worry my parents. I tried hard and eventually got a job at my current company. I switched on the intercom in the plane. "Ladies and gentlemen, although we have experienced some trouble, we will soon be preparing to land." In my mind, I thought of Megan. "I'm sorry to leave you alone, but I will definitely get you there safely." I found myself saying that naturally. "For the sake of everyone's loved ones waiting for your return, I will make sure to take you all to the destination safely." I communicated with the control tower while slowly preparing for landing. When the aircraft thudded onto the runway, I felt relieved, but I couldn't relax until all the passengers were safely off and the plane had come to a complete stop. Still, I breathed a sigh of relief when the plane finally stopped completely. "I'll help you." I assisted in getting Jason and Austin off the plane and down to the ground. "Mike, thank you so much. I think the company will contact you, so please take care." Since I also had work, I provided a brief interview and my contact information before I left. When I got to the lobby, Megan was sitting with my luggage. "Megan, sorry, and thank you for holding on to my luggage. Aren't you injured?" In response to my question, Megan looked almost tearful as she answered, "No injuries, but you being able to fly the plane and everything else, it's just too much." That makes sense. For Megan, who has a fear of heights, today must have been truly frightening. I invited Megan to a cafe to rest for a bit. When Megan's complexion had improved, I talked about my past as a pilot and about Bill. "It must have been tough, Mike, but it's great that you could overcome your fear. You achieved your dream and landed the job you admired. Being a pilot must really be your true calling." If it really is my calling, all I can say is that it's thanks to you, Megan. Megan looked surprised at my words. "Me? I didn't do anything special. It's because you and Jake were there. I think if it weren't for the two of you, I might not have been able to pilot again because I would have been too scared. The need to get you back to Jake gave me the strength. It makes enduring my fear of heights on the plane worthwhile. I'm glad I chose a flight that gave me extra time to brace myself. Let's head to that business meeting with renewed vigor." Nodding at Megan's words, we walked out of the airport together. The first business meeting was nerve-wracking but ultimately successful. Megan and I returned to the States, feeling relieved and at ease. The return flight went smoothly and landed without any issues. When I got to the States and saw Megan hugging Jake at the airport, I was so glad and relieved and made up my mind. Megan, once this job is over, I'm going back to being a pilot. There are things I need to sort out, but... Yes, that sounds right. You're definitely meant to be a pilot, Mike. I'll miss you though. After that, I quit my job and returned to be a pilot. When I went to see Bill, tears fell, and all I could do was apologize, but Bill welcomed me with a smile. Though Bill had retired from flying and was working on the ground, he was still involved in the aviation industry he loved. It was my fault too. I instilled that fear in you. But I heard you did well. You're meant to be a pilot, the airplane enthusiast. Now go, gain more and more experience, and fly the skies for both of us. Bill's words supported me, and now my fear of piloting has completely disappeared. So, it's another day of flying. In my bag, I carry the pocket tissue that Bill gave me and the airplane-shaped charm from Jake. I'll be at the controls to safely get passengers to their destinations today.